Hello, friends, and welcome to the show, Your Real Estate Today. This is an absolutely special show because we're not going to have another one like it. Why, might you ask? Because it is January 1st, 2022. There'll be no more shows on January 1st, 2022. So, Happy New Year. And there's this silly tradition. I'm from, my mother is actually Lebanese, and her family used to have a tradition every New Year's. And you had to be the first one to say to somebody else, Falit Yalek, for it's a woman, Falit Yaleki, which means may you have a prosperous and wonderful new year. And if you were the first one to tell it to somebody else, they had to give you a coin. My family was pretty cheap. I got a lot of pennies, but every once in a while, my mother would give me a coin like a Susan B. Anthony or something like that. So my mother passed away a long, long time ago, but I will tell you, I am a little bit of a softie. I still have the Susan B. Anthony she gave me from New Year's back in 1980. Tucked away. So I wish to you all, you do not have to send me a coin because you obviously can't say it to me first. I know you would if you could, but I wish you a happy and prosperous new year. And Sandy Dickinson with Cross Country Mortgage, Happy New Year, dear friend. Hope 2022 is all you dream of and for.
Oh, thank you. Happy New Year to you.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. And you too, TJ.
Happy New
I'm
Year.
spending the new year with you. Thank you so much for being with me this year.
First Christmas and now New Year.
I know. It's just like
You can't
awesome.
get enough.
I know. That's right. It's just keep showing up, you know. Felicia, I like, by the way.
Yes.
Yeah, thanks. You don't owe me a coin either. It's all good. All right. So got a great show coming today with Brad Maxwell with the Costner Law Firm. So excited to be spending time with him again. It has been way too long, and Brad will be coming up in the second segment. So excited to spend time with him because we're going to talk about wills and trusts, which is something a lot of folks, as we come into the new year, Brad's going to tell you, this is something you need to take care of now more than ever. And he has serviced a lot of clients and very good at it and can walk us through today some things that we would need to know as we come into 2022 and making sure that we plan ahead. Sandy has her mortgage update coming up, but I'm going to jump in with what I learned this week. And what I learned this week is more of a thought process because I keep getting asked the same thing. Every Christmas party I go to, every person that I run into, that every call that I make to reach out, they're going, hey, Paul, in 2022, is the real estate market going to be like it was in 2021? What do you think? Are we in for some trouble? Is it going to correct? All these houses from forbearance going to hit the market? Are things going to be upside down? Well, friends, let me tell you, in 2022, my crystal ball says, in 2022, let's go back to the fundamentals. Do I have any guarantees for you? Do I have a disclaimer like others that say some conditions apply? No, I don't do those. Here, I'm going to go back to the fundamentals, and they are as follows. There is a basic economics of supply and demand. Right now, demand outpaces supply by a huge bunch. What is a huge bunch? 5.5 to 6.5 million homes as we begin 2022. Kind of hard to screw that up. So I think we're going to be okay related to the supply and the demand wagon of economics. I have a standing joke. You all may have heard it before if you're a longtime listener. Tell me, why do they have economists, Sandy?
Why do they have economists? I don't know. Why?
It's to make weathermen look good. So,
Okay.
we go into 2022 with a bad joke, but good supplies of buyers for inventory. All right. So I'd say as you come into 2022, a lot of us that own businesses think about planning. We think about planning for the next year. We think about making plans. If you're going to sell or buy, time to make a plan. Time to get together with folks like us, folks like Costner, folks like Sandy. Make a plan. Make a plan for that move. Okay. What about investment property? Oh, great you asked that. Well, the same fundamentals apply, right? Supply of rental properties is down at one of its lowest points right now. Demand? Well, if people can't get a place to live and buy, what are they going to do? Rent. So you're faced with that same economics. So you also look at return on cash, you look at appreciation, and you look at you have control over that asset. I love rental property. It's something you can control. My stock with Elon Musk, my 8 shares of it, I got no control over Elon Musk, but I got control of my rental houses. I really do. So I think 2022 will be the time of making offers. Again, I think they'll slow down with the number of offers that are offered out there. The market, I think, is going to go up somewhere between 7 and 10% next year. But I think you'll see less craziness in 2022 than 2021, but still a vibrant, solid, and great market. So after the break, you'll hear me talk with Brad Maxwell. Sandy's coming up here in just a second. And then we're going to talk about how to make the best 2022 ever. So you're going to want to hear that. Sandy, what's going on in the mortgage world?
Well, lots is going on. The Fed is going to have to double the pace of tapering off the infusion that they're putting into bonds. So they're planning on hike raises over the next 3 years, probably starting in March. So in the meantime, they're going to keep tapering until they're not infusing any more money into the bond market. So generally, that means the rates are going to go up. Now, if the bond market perceives that as reducing inflation, we may still be okay for a little bit. But general consensus is that rates will be going up over the next, I don't know, couple years anyway. Purchases are still great. Like you said, they're still pretty good. They're on the upswing. Refis are a little on the downswing. No surprise there. But people are still doing a lot of cash out refinances. So we still have the new mortgage limits. Conventional now is you have to be above 647.2 to get into the jumbo market, and FHA you can go as high as 420, 680. So all that's excellent news.
Yeah, that's really great news. You know, Sandy, the theme of the show today is going to be talking about wills and trusts and planning, and then I'm also going to talk about how to make the best 2022 ever. Related, and of course there's multiple subjects for that, and you know it's not an end all be all, but related to your world, in the next 15-20 seconds, planning is important, right? If someone's getting a mortgage next year, they need to get to you early, right?
Absolutely, yeah. So start now, because we got tax season coming up next year. You want to make sure that you're filing taxes correctly and on time if at all possible, and you know, and getting the money and the finances in order. So if you want to buy a house or refinance, we'll be happy to get that done for you.
And how do they get you?
They call my mobile 704-577-0144.
704-577-0144, Sandy Dickinson, Cross Country Mortgage. And as it said, coming up, Paul Jameson, me, your host, will spend the rest of the hour with you, along with Brad Maxwell with the Costner Law Firm. Happy New Year as we roll into segment 2. Thank you, Sandy, and we look forward to spending the year with you. Much, much more to come. The Show You Real Estate today here on News Talk 1110, 99.3 WBT. Happy New Year. The show Your Real Estate Today. Paul Jameson, your host with the Jameson family of companies. That's realty, property management, and property investments. You know, I have been doing this a long time, and I find myself sometimes forgetting to say who I am. And so you just go through the first segment of the show, and I don't even say my name. So it's so funny though. I'll go to an event, and after doing this for almost 14 years, somebody will say, Jameson, and then I'll cover my face, and they'll go, "You're the guy." It's kind of fun. But anyway, Brad, welcome back. It's been a while, huh?
It has, Paul. Yeah, it's good. It's good to be back. Good to talk with you on the show.
Good to start with you in the new year, friend, for sure.
Absolutely.
Happy 2022. So I'm excited to have you because, Brad, one of the things that people don't pay enough attention to is the inevitable, right?
Right.
And the plans that, they need to have some type of an estate plan. A lot of questions I'm sure you get typically are, do I still need one? Do I need a will? Do I need a trust? Do I need those kind of things? And what do you say when people ask you that?
Sure. You hit the nail on the head. One of the most common questions I get from clients when they come to see me about their estate planning is, do I need a trust? The first thing that I typically like to tell people is you probably need something at the end of the day, because we need something to help with your plans, right? We need to make a plan. But what you need is going to vary on your circumstances. It's going to depend on what you have, who you have to give it to, who you want to give it to. And a lot of times it will also depend on what state we're in, what kind of assets you have and where they're located. And so I'm licensed in North and South Carolina, so I focus more on the North and South Carolina piece. And a lot of times when people hear stuff on the internet or see stuff on the internet or hear stuff on the news, they're hearing about what's best for them on a national scale. And so a lot of times we really do need to look at what's best for them on the state level, because those are the courts that we're going to be working with and the laws that we're going to be working with.
Yeah. You know what's interesting, Brad, because you have worked with some of my clients in the past, and one of the things I find interesting in the world, and this kind of leads into kind of how you take somebody through it and advantages and disadvantages, but you can go to a website and fill in the blanks and have a document of sorts, right?
Absolutely.
But the challenge with that is no different than, working with an online lender or working with somebody that it has, or even getting on Zillow and looking at this estimate. There's no educated conversation that talks about the things you just talked about, right? The idiosyncrasies of, hey, you might need to think about this, or is there somebody involved or not? Speak to that for a minute, because this is not in its best form a fill in the blank document, is it?
You're absolutely right. And there certainly are a lot of outlets out there where you can do that. And I won't say that they don't serve a purpose, because they certainly do for some people. But I think that there is certainly risk associated with that. Every single person is different. Every single family scenario is different, as most of us well know.
Boy, every day.
Right. And everybody has a different idea of what is best for their family, their assets. And so I think it's important. And again, like I said a little bit earlier too, every state's a little bit different. Now, granted, when you go to these websites and do these fill in the blank forms, certainly there is going to be some tailoring to those state laws, just a little bit. But like you said, you don't get that conversation. And that conversation is really what's important, because there's nuances, and there's different things that have to be discussed. There's some questions that need to be asked that may not be asked. that can draw out certain answers from my clients. A lot of times people don't know what to ask. So that's my job, is to ask them the questions that pull out the information I need.
Right. And just before we kind of launch into that, you made a great note in the notes that you sent me, that before we kind of launch into the pros and cons of the basic things, there are some fundamental definitions about a will and a trust, and types of trusts that are probably worth discussing. Would that be fair to say?
Yeah. So, a will is a document. It's what we call a testamentary document, meaning it has no effect until you pass away. So while you're alive, it is just a piece of paper that you signed. But when you pass away, it becomes something more than that. It becomes something that's dictating where you want your assets to go, and more specifically, the assets that go through the probate court. A lot of times people think if I have a will, I get to avoid probate, and that's a common misconception. A will is fundamentally part of the probate process. So,
the probate process is what?
The probate process is a court process that actually means to determine the validity of a will. So a will doesn't have any effect until a court puts their seal of approval on it, which makes sense. We don't want just bunches of papers with signatures flying around everywhere. Somebody's got to actually say that this is your valid will, right? So that's what the court does. Most of the time, that's a pretty easy scenario, right? Because most of the time it's not being contested. We just want the court to put their seal of approval on that. And it's also where we deal with the distribution of assets that we don't know where it goes otherwise. And by that, I mean, if we look at an IRA, for example, it's going to have most likely, you might have a beneficiary on a retirement account. You may have a beneficiary on your bank account. Those paid on death beneficiaries mean we know where it goes. So the probate court does not get involved and your will does not get involved. And that's good news, because that generally means it's one less thing that we get government involvement in, right? And we don't have to worry about it. From there, we go into what is a trust. So a trust at its core is a probate avoidance tool. It helps us avoid probate. And it does that by titling assets in the name of the trust, such that when we die, there is nothing in our name individually without a beneficiary where we're wondering where it goes. Since it was in the name of the trust already, our death is just a triggering event within that document on how to distribute those assets. And then there's, of course, some other questions there, but those are our fundamental definitions.
Right. One thing with a trust, if I may, that presents a lot of confusion is revocable versus irrevocable. I know what the words mean, but.
Right. So the most common that we will see is the revocable living trust. And that is our probate avoidance tool that we're talking about. Because it is revocable, the grantor, so that's the individual who's setting it up, they have the ability to amend, terminate, revoke the document at any time during their lifetime. It's almost like it doesn't quite exist during their lifetime because it's still theirs, still their assets, right? They still have all the ability to change, manipulate, do whatever they want to do. It's when they die that it kind of shuts down, so to speak, and becomes irrevocable at that point. Now, on the flip side, we do have irrevocable trusts. Those are the trusts that, while they also avoid probate, that is not their main objective. The main objective of an irrevocable trust is creditor protection. And that is because since it is irrevocable, let me back up one step. What I often tell people to avoid creditors, they will have access to what you have access to. So if you want to limit a creditor's access, you have to limit your own, which is a catch-22, right? We don't always want that. And so we don't set up irrevocable trusts quite as often, but they do serve a purpose sometimes in Medicaid planning, but that's another conversation.
Yeah. All right. So we're going to get into more of that. and much more. I'm really glad you're here, Brad, because this is a great conversation for the new year. To show your real estate today. We're together with you in 2022. We'll be right back. News Talk 1110 99.3 WBT. Welcome back. You know, I keep playing the same song in 2021 as I do in 2022.
It's a good one.
I know, I like it. You know, I worked really hard on those 4 chords, but you know, that's about as far as I could get. You know, the thanks for doing the drums and the backup.
You and Chuck Berry both.
Yeah, I
That's
know.
all they could do.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. But he can move better than I can.
Well,
I got one
work.
leg shorter than the other, and can't do that. So anyway, it is what it is. But anyway, welcome back. To show you real estate today, Paul Jameson here, your host, owner of the Jameson family of companies. Here with Brad Maxwell with the Costner Law Firm. You know, one of the things that was so essential for having Brad with us today and talking with us today was bringing in the new year with some planning items that we need to discuss and that we need to pay attention to. And wills and trusts are one of those. And as you said, Brad, in the last segment, this is planning. This is planning at its highest level for the inevitable, right? For a lot of us, and I speak the truth here, that our families, I've never really met a functional family. So there's family dynamics as opposed to there's lots of dysfunctionals, right?
Right.
I'm looking to meet one of those sometime, functional.
Sure.
But there's always dynamics when it comes to money and assets and death that can break apart a family. And for me, personally, Brad, the ability to say with the assets that I have left at the time of my death, whether that be today or in the very, 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 very distant future, this is how I want those assets to be distributed and the parameters around those. You know, the assumption is based on that automatically, you know, if something happens to me and Carrie's still around, they go to her, right? But ultimately with children, with second marriages, with daughter-in-laws, with grandchildren, with all of those pieces, that's why this is so critical to have you on today, Brad. And before we launch into the segment, this will be one of 2 times I'd ask you, if people want to talk to you about this, what number would they call to do that?
Sure. Well, my direct line here at the office is 704-900-1133. They can get me there, as well as email. If they wanted to email me, sometimes I'm reachable there as well at brad.maxwell, MAXWELL, at CostnerGroup.com.
And you said the number 704-900-1134?
1133. That is my direct line. Yes.
704-900-1133 is his direct line if you want to talk through those things. And especially if you had issues during Christmas with some family members and want to make some changes. This would be a really good time to do that. And you know, here's the unfortunate part too, Brad, and this is not a political statement. This is life. COVID and the vaccine and what's going on has divided a lot of families.
Sure.
So one of the things that's important is to make sure that there aren't other things that divide families as well, because healing needs to take place. And death sometimes is the place where that healing does happen. So
Absolutely.
I think it's a great time to plan, Brad. I think it's a great time to do that. So let's launch into the advantages and disadvantages of wills and trusts, if you would.
Sure. So as I mentioned earlier, you know, a trust is what our probate avoidance tool is. So that is kind of the essential difference between our will and our trust is probate avoidance. So when we're looking at the advantages and disadvantages of a will, The advantages of a will are going to be pretty clear cut. It's simple. It's short and sweet. It's not going to be nearly as extensive and paperwork, which a lot of people like. It's also much less expensive, just because there is not as much legalese and not as much, I hate to say it, but just paperwork and legal time and construction that's put into the documents, right? The disadvantages, which in my opinion is not a terrible disadvantage, but the disadvantage is it isn't a probate avoidance tool. So if you are looking to avoid probate, then you would want to go with a trust. That begs the question, why do we want to avoid probate, right? So some of those reasons that we would want to avoid probate could be cost. It could be that probate court costs could be very high. That's going to vary from state to state. I will tell you, in South Carolina and North Carolina, probate court costs are not terribly high by comparison to some other states. If we have a few assets going through the probate court, probably not going to break the bank. So that it's important to kind of consider that cost benefit analysis and knowing what am I going to spend on the trust at the front end versus what am I saving at the back end in return. Some of the other reasons we would want to avoid probate could be privacy. Maybe you have a pretty detailed and nuanced and private estate plan. A will is a public document. It gets filed in the public records when you pass away. That's not to say everybody's looking at it all the time, but it is a public record, right? A trust is a private document. It does not get recorded with the courthouse. Some of the other disadvantages, or let me back up on that, sorry. Some of the advantages of the living trust and that probate avoidance could also be more certainty. Sometimes we consider wills to be a little bit easier to contest than a trust. The reason that is because a will doesn't come into play until after you're gone. And so you don't have a chance to kind of speak up on the matter as to the validity of your own document. With a trust, it's created and effective while you're alive. So it's a little bit harder for somebody to say, you didn't mean to put what you put in there, because it was effective while you were alive and you were able to kind of you're able to voice your opinion on that, right? If it comes up. Going back to that advantage of the will being less expensive, that would be the disadvantage of the trust. The trust is a more expensive document to set up. And so for some people, if they know that probate avoidance is not a main goal for them, they may opt for the will only.
Yeah, but you know that with the trust, Brad, the one advantage in it, and again, this played out for me personally. So I'm putting myself in the position of a lot of folks that listen to this station that are in the same generation as I, and that is that when I originally set up the trust, the Revocable Trust for myself and my family, my kids were smaller. They weren't married. They were a lot more prone to blow everything than they are now. Let's just put it that way. So in the last few years, I've changed everything because I now have grandkids and other things. So this document is, and I love the way you said it, it's a living document, right?
Correct. Yeah. So I mean, we can amend either document, but you're correct. I mean, a trust is a bit more easily amended without tossing the old, right? We just kind of make adjustments to the terms if we need to make adjustments. With wills, usually if we're going to make changes, we kind of toss the old document and just do a completely new one, which for cost and convenience reasons, we may not want to do near as much.
Yeah. So there's no time but the present to get this process rolling. Would you not agree?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I've often joke with some seriousness with many of my clients that, once they get this done, it's one less thing to stress about and they'll probably live a lot longer anyway.
Right. That's right. And if you do a closing with Costner, typically inside of the package that you walk away with is also Brad's information. Brad is typically the one that handles the estate planning for the firm. And what's your number again to connect with Brad? What is it one more time?
Yeah, it's 704-900-1133. 704-900-1133.
704-900-1133. Brad Maxwell with the Costner Law Firm. We've got a lot more with Brad and myself, Paul Jameson, on the show Your Real Estate Today. We'll be right back here on News Talk 1110 99.3 WBT. Stay right there. Hello, friends. Happy New Year. If you're just tuning on, you've just now popped onto the show Your Real Estate Today, and we wish you again a Happy New Year. I'm Paul Jameson, your host. I own the Jameson family of companies. That's Jameson Realty, Jameson Property Management, and Jameson Property Investments, here with Brad Maxwell with the Costner Law Firm. We're talking about your real estate, and we're talking about wills and trusts. We're talking about now my topic too, which is to take this opportunity to make the best 2022 you can. And the first thing that I noticed and I think about and I've talked about with family members through this holiday season has been people are fed up with the mask and they're starting to push back. But in order to make this the best 2022 ever, I still ask, as I am sometimes begrudgingly after I've had many breaths of my own carbon is it monoxide or dioxide? Monoxide? Yeah, whichever one. My exhale back into my own self. That still, there's a lot of sensitivity around it. And just to continue to be respectful of others and not have another reason to divide us. So, hang with the mask if you can, but, know that at some point we're all going to unmask and breathe on each other happily. All right. Hopefully in 2022, get some gum. Next, liberal policies are hitting those that champion them and they don't like it. And the reason I mentioned that to have a great 2022 is whether you're on the left or the left thinks the right is liberal, the right thinks the left is liberal. So whatever policies you're carrying, realize it's all going to shake itself out when we go to the ballot box in 2022. It's coming. So look forward to that. That's going to make it a great year. Change is good. All right. So let's just all look forward to see where people are in November of 2022. It's going to be an exciting time. I can tell you that. All right. Next, the backlog of new homes, as I talked about in the first segment, circling back to real estate, is climbing due to labor shortages, material logistic issues, and existing home sales will win the day. And that's important. And before I move on to that, I talked to Brad just briefly during the break, and I told him, I said, hey, I'm going to bring this up. If you have investment real estate, even more of a reason to have a trust, to predicate how that gets handled, right?
Yeah, I mean, probate, real estate is always governed by the laws of the state where it's located or the county where it's located. So when people own multiple pieces of real estate, that could mean multiple courthouses that we have to work with and deal with. So there's a bit more advantage to setting up a trust when you have multiple pieces of real estate, so that we can have all of that under one umbrella without having to deal with the complexity of multiple probate courts.
Exactly. And to your point, Brad, what's interesting is not and from a will and estate perspective, but also an insurance perspective. As we're now doing evaluations with our investor clients, we're talking about these things. We're talking about your estate, the reason why you have investment property, What happens if something happens to you? If you have mortgages on those properties, we're asking, hey, do you need to take a look at the rates and see if we can improve on this investment, either by a cash out refi, taking some of the equity out if you want to hold it, or just refinance it, the existing mortgage you have at a lower rate to increase the returns on your investment. And what does that look like based on how long you plan to keep it? Also, insurance, going back and taking a look at your insurance. One of the biggest things that people turn a blind eye to is, do I have the proper coverages for the real estate or assets that I own, right? And one of the things I'm a big proponent of is a personal liability umbrella. And a personal liability umbrella is great, but you also have to make sure that those assets that you have are covered under that umbrella and that they're named under that umbrella. Just like on your homeowner's policy, if you have a watch that Gammy or Gampy gave you and you want to make sure it's covered, you got to have it itemized out. Otherwise, it'll be a part of some prorated deductible under a clause that you may have. The other clause that I really push people to get on their insurance is what's called a loss rent rider, a lost rent rider. If you have a catastrophe and the home is not rentable, you then continue to receive rental income after a predisposed period of time, which will help you make that mortgage and that mortgage payment if you so have one. If you have vacation rental at the coast, boy, you better have that bad boy, because it saved my bacon. Because when Hurricane Matthew and Hurricane Irma came through, and flood and wind and hail are arguing with each other, neither one paid the claim. What saved my bacon was that lost rent rider, which was the most inexpensive rider added to my policy. So I got paid rent at full rate every day for every day I could not rent the property after, I think it was a 2-week period. It was awesome. It helped pay for the tens of thousands of dollars worth of damage that we suffered. But insurance is an important aspect related to this, all right? So then let's move into the nuts and bolts of it. So take that same piece of real estate, and we do this 2 or 3 times a year with our clients. Hey, I bought it here. It is now worth here. Do we want to keep it? Do we want to sell it and move the assets to another place? Do we want to sell it and just pay the taxes and take the money and go? What does the picture of the asset look like right now? And we do that a couple of times a year with our property management clients. It's an asset that needs to be evaluated. Things have changed, people. Over the last couple of years, real estate's gone up almost 30%. And remember I talked earlier about the lack of supply in new construction? If you've got an existing house right now that has a garage door, windows, a roof, and appliances, you're 90% ahead of everybody else trying to build a house right now because they can't get it. 18 weeks for a garage door. Are you kidding me? Hopefully that'll change. And, it's just, and also the labor market. You got to have labor, right? So the next thing you do is reevaluate the rents. Listen, I have this conversation all the time, Brad. It's hilarious. They'll go, I don't want to raise the rent. I'm afraid they'll move out. Well, okay. But let's look at it another way. So on that house that you own, have your taxes gone up? Have your insurance costs gone up? Your maintenance costs gone up? Have your costs gone up on that real estate investment? And its value certainly gone up. But if you go to any apartment complex, you go anywhere where somebody rents, their rent's going to go up every year like clockwork. And if you look at a $50 a month increase, that's $600 a year. What does it cost to rent a truck? What does it cost to move? They ain't moving for $600. You know, the dumbest thing ever? I didn't have to go. I went to Cincinnati, rented a car, 2 days, $340 for 2 days for a super economy car. Costs are going up. Raise your rent. All right. Brad Maxwell, Costner Law Firm. Give him a call, 704-900-1133. If you're interested in wills or trusts, us at 846-DONE, 846-3663, or on the web at myjamesonhomes.com. Let's evaluate your real estate. Let's look at it from a tax perspective. Let's look at it from an evaluation perspective. Let's look at it like an investor and make a decision. That'll make a great 2022. Happy New Year, Brad.
Happy New Year to you too, Paul.
Thank you so much. I'm Paul Jameson. Looking forward to spending 2022 with you and to show you real estate today here on News Talk 1110 99.3 WBT.